Uhuru, I am Solyana, your very own managing editor for the Burning Spear newspaper.
Uhuru comrades, I'm Dr. Mariah, promotions manager and volunteer at Black Power 96 Radio, bringing you the voice of our community to this panel.
Uhuru Sasa means Uhuru now. I'm Jainabah Lumumba, your Southern Regional Representative for the African People's Socialist Party.
Uhuru, and my name is Akilé Anai. I'm the Director of Media and Communications for the African People's Socialist Party, and you are now tuned in to One Africa Worldview, the weekly news podcast bringing you revolutionary news and analysis on the day's top headlines. This show is a program of Burning Spear Media and is aired on the Burning Spear TV YouTube and Burning Spear Media on Rumble. We sum everything up from the African internationalist perspective, a theory developed by Chairman Omali Yeshitela, leader of the Uhuru Movement, which centers the issue of colonialism and the colonial mode of production as the leading cause for war, poverty, genocide, oppression, and exploitation that we see and experience throughout the world. And if you hate the censorship of authentic revolutionary voices, then take this moment right now to like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel and our Rumble. Help us reach our 15,000 subscriber goal by the end of this month. And we kick off today's show with the Whirlwind Weekly Update, followed by our primary objective, and then we'll end with the For the Culture segment, where we deliver briefs on the most important issues going on in our communities worldwide. So with that, let's move on to our next segment with our first headline, which, of course, has to deal with Iran. And in this latest regarding Iran's fight against Israel and the US and world colonial powers, as of June 18th, Leviathan and Karish oil fields have been shut down. These oil fields supply 2/3 of Israel's domestic gas. Haifa's Bazan oil refinery shut down due to damage. This will affect Jordan, Egypt, and possibly Europe. Throughout this week, there have been many videos of Israelis in shelters. Israel hacked Iranians' televisions, broadcasting an arrogant command to rebel against the government of the Islamic Republic of Iran. In response, Iranians came out in support of their government. Iran damaged the Israeli stock exchange in Ramat Gan, east of Tel Aviv. Iran targeted the facility next to Soroka Hospital in Biz Ashabi, south of occupied Palestine. The facility contained digital command systems and cyber warfare operations. By June 19th, Iran had used 30% of its military capacity. Iran knew for months that war was unavoidable. Iran hit a large target on June 20th, Gav Yam Technology Park in Beersheba. It has been a way to lure investors. It's known that the technology park contains housing joint operations between Israeli intelligence units, military contractors, and private tech companies. Also, the private tech companies shield the military sites. A Microsoft facility was hit. Companies such as Microsoft, IBM, and Motorola are all involved in Israeli occupation. Iran's intelligence forces arrested a European spy. The Iranian people are showing their courage by continuing their normal lives, even during a drone attack. Iranian MP Sabeti explained the US-Israel deception, attacking Iran and carrying out assassinations when they were in negotiations. The exclusionary nature of Israeli society was on display as Israelis prevented a Ukrainian from entering their shelters. Iran's cyber core of the IRGC have collapsed part of Israel's command, control, communications, computers, and intelligence structure, and Israel's data collection structure. Iran struck the longest road from Metula in northern occupied Palestine to Eilat, which is 400 kilometers long. There are videos of hundreds of Israelis fleeing to Cyprus. On June 21st, Trump implemented a Biden-era strike against Iran's Fordow and Natanz nuclear facilities, distracting everyone from a B-2 bomber, while several GPU-57s were used against Fordow and Natanz, which are protected by a mountain. The U.S. bombs failed to destroy Fordow and Natanz, just damaging the entrance tunnels, which Iran had filled with earth. Iran had moved to the nuclear material beforehand, and this U.S. attack against Iran's nuclear program is a violation of the Geneva Convention. Iran showed it was far from defeated by completely destroying the Institute for Biological Research in Nes Ziona. The secret facility is linked to biological warfare and assassination plots and has Israel's unconventional weapons. As of June 22nd, the Israelis have started to fight each other in their shelters. Some have said that Israel may collapse in 5 years. As of June 22nd, Iran has launched 20 waves of Operation True Promise 3, and Yemen launched an offensive on Israel. In the past 24 hours on June 2nd, 25,000 have requested flights on Israeli airport El Al. Pakistan reaffirmed Iran's right to defend itself, and just today, Iran launched missiles at a U.S. base in Qatar and at Iraq, where the U.S. keeps military facilities. So the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Kuwait have closed their airspaces. And the bourgeois media is attempting to turn the Iranian people against their own government, classic tactic, and trying to depict the Iranians as incapable of carrying out a counteroffensive. But the Iranian people stand firm, making it clear at a demonstration in Tehran on Sunday evening that they believe in Iran's right to self-defense.
And we believe in that too. And speaking of, just the whole question of Iran, I must salute our chairman, Omali Shatella, leader of the African nation, who has always stood on the right side of the question when it comes to the illegitimate settler colonial state of Israel, or what the kids are calling isn't real. But recently, settler colonizer Ted Cruz, alleged senator of the so-called state of Texas, and settler colonizer journalist CIA reject Tucker Carlson sat down for a heated exchange in what some are calling white on white or hog on hog violence. Let's take a look at the video of them arguing, followed by a statement from our chairman, Omali Shatella himself.
You're a senator who's calling for the overthrow of the government.
You're the one who
know anything about the country.
No, you don't know anything about the country.
I've never taken money from the Israel lobby. Have you? How many people live in Iran, by the way?
I don't know the population.
At all?
No, I don't know the population.
You don't know the population of the country you seek to topple?
How many people live in Iran?
92 million.
Okay.
I'm only trying to get to the question of what AIPAC is, and I don't think you're being straightforward about it. AIPAC is lobbying on behalf of the interests of a foreign country, and they're not registered. And you're saying, no, that's not true. You're saying that they don't coordinate with the Israeli government.
Of course, I coordinate. They talk with them. I don't know what they do. I can tell you.
But why don't you care? The law is, and a lot of people have been prosecuted under this law, that if you are lobbying on behalf of foreign government, you must register. I have to register under the Foreign Agent Registration Act, and if I don't, I can go to jail. And people have gone to jail, including people I know.
African People's Socialist Party. Omali Shatella, the chairman of this group, the man now accused of being a Russian agent and about to go on trial. We're honored to have him join us now. Mr. Chairman, thank you so much.
Have to have military training. All of them, you reach a certain age, you go through military training. They are settler regime. They are military force. They are an advanced force of the U.S. Colonial empire, not only for the Middle East, but also for Africa, especially Northern Africa. They have functioned as terrorist entities, and they challenge even the stability of the world because of their willingness not only to continue to expand what they now characterize as Israel. You know, they stole the Golan Heights from Syria. They're attacking Syria. Even as we have this discussion, they are making attacks on Syria, and they are threatening Iran.
Chairman Omali Shatella on point as usual. Chow and Tucker was on Ted's case like that little thing was on Carlson's lips. Anyway, immediately I found that, I have to say, I found that 2-hour-long interview between the political commentator and the colonial senator to be entertaining, but we still understand that as the war on ideas. And what's important about Tucker raising the whole question about AIPAC being registered as agents of a foreign government all boils down to Chairman Omali Shatella and the trial of the century, the case of the Uhuru 3. The U.S. government issued bogus charges on the Uhuru Movement, targeting Chairman Omali Shatella himself, stating that we worked for the Russians. And while the jury said no, that we work for Black people, still the question remains, why aren't the agents of AIPAC, who are operating under the direction and control of Israel, quite literally interfering in American elections, why aren't they considered agents? And if they're honest, it's because Israel is an arm of the U.S. and they have the same interests. And it highlights the sham that this is a so-called legal system, because just as Chairman Omali Yeshitela states, the law is just the opinion of the ruling class. So despite what may be considered decent journalism, Tuck is not arguing with Ted about not seeking to topple another country, but rather lambasting him for not knowing the basic facts about the country he's trying to topple. These individuals, these colonizers, share the same America First interest, but they want intervention to be implemented in a different manner to maintain the status quo. So while they can argue about how they want things to remain as it is within the African People's Socialist Party, we, the African, the indigenous, the colonized people of the world, we're forced to labor in Jeff Bezos's open air prison warehouses across this indigenous land that they're calling America. Or while we pick the bananas on a plantation in Nicaragua or in Central America, it's the Tuckers and the Teds that attempt to crush the revolutionary efforts in these places so that Walbog can have low prices for him and his offspring. And so when you see that elderly African woman with a heavy load of hand harvested coffee beans on her head, crushing her poor spine in that Starbucks, facility, it's forces like Ted and Tucker who argue over what interventions looks like, but Starbucks is still going to try to maintain and deliver their mocha cocoa latte with extra cream in their gentrified area on stolen land. These are the CIA rejects who get a platform and they go viral while we're shadow banned. But the crisis of imperialism is here and now, and they're going to have to reckon with the reality that whether they can articulate clearly the population of whom they seek to topple, it won't work. We are winning.
Real. All right. Wow, comrades, I think you left us stunned a little bit there, Jainabah. So why don't we go ahead and move on to our next headline, which is on June 18th, the Supreme Court upheld Tennessee's ban on gender affirming care for people under 18. And though this decision was made in the context of Tennessee law, it has opened the door for other states to do the same should they wish to. And in the court's view, the decision was made because a, quote, state law banning puberty blockers and hormone therapy for the treatment of gender dysphoria in minors did not violate the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution. And in the wake of this court decision, conversation around Dobbs has also come up. This is the case that overturned the decision of Roe v. Wade, eliminating the right to abortion at the federal level. These Supreme Court decisions have been used as examples of a new era of fascism that Trump's presidency and the MAGA movement have been spearheading. However, the state's attacks on African people's rights, as well as the decades of awful medical practices and the neglect and malpractice to which African people have been subjected, have been a reality existing before and after these court decisions. And what this reveals is that a Democratic candidate in power is not what will eradicate these conditions that colonial capitalism imposes on African people and imposes on, people as a whole. Right. Because, again, we're talking about, this is being used as it's a new era of fascism. And see, this is why you should, hate Trump. And but the reality is, even though it might have seemed like Biden or the Democratic Party is more progressive on these issues, the fact is that they have an interest in maintaining a colonial system that oppresses and exploits everyone, and especially those forces who represent a deviation from the ideological foundation of colonialism. So, and that would be trans people, right? Because if you're talking about a social system birthed through, or, with an ideological foundation in like Christianity and conservatism.
Family first.
Yes, exactly. So these are like deviations, from that. So, so we just need not be confused that despite the fact that this is happening, under a Trump administration, very more open, honest, white nationalist regime, the fact is the same that oppression, exploitation has existed under the colonial mode of production. African and colonized people, including African trans people, bear the brunt of this system. And, colonizer trans people cannot obtain their rights at our expense and cannot make colonialism more comfortable for themselves at our expense. So yeah, that's what we wanted to bring clarity around with regard to this issue, because we know there's a lot of discussion and argument about this question, and none of it's being characterized in this way. So yeah, so let's go on over to our next headline with Comrade Mariah.
Well, it's been over 5 weeks now since the EF3 tornado devastated all the African community over in Northside St. Louis, and 7 people died when this happened. And I mean, it's just unable to still shelter after the city failed to activate the tornado alarm. They did not activate the tornado alarm. Entire quarters of the Black community were ravaged, torn, destroyed, with roofs torn off, the walls collapsed, massive trees down onto cars and homes, power lines toppled, just more than 10,000 homes were damaged. And now, over 5 weeks later, this is a month and a half later, the community is still buried under all this debris, sleeping in tents, demanding that the city release its massive reserve funds to rebuild that north side. And the Uhuru Movement continues to mobilize hundreds of volunteers and donated materials in that recovery and rebuilding of the community. And we're also leading the fight back to stop the land grab by greedy developers in so-called Pentagon of the West, the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency that has long coveted our Northside community's land to build condos for its growing mercenary workforce. So scores of activists and African community members attended several recent meetings of the city and Board of Aldermen to voice their people's demands. And for one, the immediate restoration of electrical power. Just electricity to the area, to all the buildings that were under that repair. And then shortly after the tornado, these red tags, and we talked about the red tags before, these red tags reading danger, entry prohibited, violators subject to prosecution. These were placed on people's homes, over 1,500 homes over in the Black community, by volunteer inspectors who did not even enter these homes, but made cursory assessments from the sidewalk. So then on June 2nd, they cut off electricity to these thousands of people in this area, the Black area, homes in the Northside Black community, even as repairs were in process or already completed. So homes on the white South Side, they were damaged, but they weren't red tagged. So, and they didn't have their power cut off. So we're demanding the city to turn the power back on and turn it back on now. And the community is also demanding that the immediate release of funds go to rebuilding of the homes over here, and provide temporary housing, employ some of the local Black contractors, and just really support all the businesses and the homes affected over in the area. And the mayor of St. Louis actually has acknowledged that the city is really flush with resources. And those resources, we determined it includes a $42 city budget surplus, a nearly $500 million in unspent federal ARPA COVID relief funds, and $290 million from a settlement that the city actually got from the Rams, plus $30 million in addition from the interest already earned from that settlement. So on June 10th, a national disaster was finally declared over in the area, promising access to FEMA funds. And we know what happened with FEMA under their administration. And the mayor has been forced to actually suspend a St. Louis ordinance that requires the insurance companies to give 25% of property insurance claims payouts to the city, leaving the homeowner short of the funds needed to really complete these repairs in the area. So on June 17th, bowing to community pressure, the mayor agreed to release $30 million in interest that is accrued from the RAND settlement money, and the Board of Aldermen reallocated $5 million in community development block grant funds and decided to accept $7 million in pro-housing grant funds to address housing-related needs. And I mean, really, this is just a drop in the bucket. When recovery and rebuilding costs it's estimated to over $1.5 billion at this point, and the city's published plan to use that first $30 million, that's nothing, included a list of priority neighborhoods, and we know who was at the top of that list: the white neighborhoods, right at the top, and the Black neighborhoods, where were they? At the bottom, already victims of decades of intentional lack of infrastructure maintenance and city investment, right there on the last on the list, right there, not mentioned at all. And we will not allow the Black community, once again, to be denied the resources that it needs and deserves. The Uhuru Movement is continuing our work to rebuild that North Side community and to create the ability for our people to feed, clothe, house, and educate ourselves. We're tired of creating life for someone else, and it's time to create it for ourselves.
Uhuru, thank you so much, Comrade Araya, for that update from Northside St. Louis. And continuing on this theme of environmental colonialism, it is being reported that a life-threatening heat dome in the U.S. is approaching this week, prompting an estimated 147 million alerts to people in 28 different states as record highs are expected to be challenged. Weather reports say that the heat dome will have more than 190 million U.S. residents in the east experiencing temperatures above 90 degrees, with humidity too soaring, with dew points rising into the 70s. So states expected to be impacted include Illinois, Ohio, Kentucky, Missouri, Tennessee, North Carolina, Minnesota, Missouri, Virginia. I can attest to Virginia, okay? It is blistering. Pennsylvania, New York, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Washington, D.C., and going into the Canadian border. So all up and down the eastern seaboard is just blistering heat. And residents need to prepare for this extreme heat wave, as it's been documented that heat actually kills more U.S. residents than flooding, tornadoes, hurricanes, or lightning. So very dangerous temperatures out there.
Wow. Well, I'm out in Florida and we are used to blistering heat, but that is extreme. And they're saying record breaking, heat temperature. So really important for people to prepare for that, especially because as we just pointed out, the governments will not be coming to the people's aid, in the events of, these conditions. So continuing on with our Whirlwind Weekly updates, we have a very important update in the case of the Uhuru 3. So very exciting. On June 16th, attorneys representing the Uhuru 3, Chairman Amalia Shatella, Penny Hess, and Jesse Neville, filed an appeal brief in the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals seeking to overturn their 2024 conviction on a bogus conspiracy charge. The federal prosecution of the Uhuru 3, which was launched with a 2022 military multi-city raid by the FBI, was mentioned in the Tucker Carlson video, of 7 Uhuru homes and offices, was the first case in which the government used the statute criminalizing unregistered foreign agents, also 18 USC 951, to target political or dissenting speech. So since then, scores of raids, arrests, and prosecutions have been conducted targeting pro-Palestinian organizers, anti-war dissenters, and journalists with accusations of foreign malign influence. And similarly, we also know that our comrades of Union del Barrio have been attacked, with a whole counterterrorism investigations, right? So because they're out there vocal about the conditions of colonialism that affect Mexican indigenous people. So they're a target now for this whole counterterrorism thing. So this is like along the same lines. But the attack on the Uhuru 3 opened the door, set the precedent like we said it would, to all of these attacks on anti-colonial free speech. So the September 2024 trial, which is characterized as the trial of the century, of the Uhuru 3 in federal court in Tampa, Florida, was widely recognized as a test case for free speech. Federal prosecutors charged the African People's Socialist Party's chairman, Amalia Shatella, and the Uhuru 3 with acting as unregistered foreign agents of Russia and conspiracy to do the same, solely citing constitutionally protected activities, including demonstrations, petitions, and the publication of articles in our own newspaper, The Burning Spear. So they were found not guilty on the foundational charge of being agents of Russia, but were wrongly convicted on the secondary charge of conspiracy to act as unregistered agents of Russia. So it doesn't even make sense. Like, make it make sense. It don't. So their defense campaign won support from a wide spectrum of free speech defenders, anti-war dissenters, social justice activists, scholars, and journalists, including the National Lawyers Guild, U.S. Peace Council, Vets for Peace, Jill Stein, former NYC Councilman Charles Barron, former St. Louis Alderman Jesse Todd, Dr. Cornel West, Dr. Gerald Horn, Scott Ritter, Glenn Greenwald, System Update, Max Blumenthal, Anya Parampil, Katie Halper, Aaron Mate, and Tucker Carlson, matter of fact. So these were all people that recognized, regardless of what they identified with politically, that this was an attack on free speech. And again, it would open the door to everyone. And that's why Tucker Carlson was booted off of Fox. The real reason why Tucker Carlson was booted off of Fox was because he talked about the party and exposed, this case before his millions of viewers. So in the appeal brief, Uhuru 3 attorneys argue that the conviction should be reversed on the grounds that the prosecution itself violated the First Amendment. As attorney Leonard Goodman stated, the government here is using a federal criminal statute to prosecute members of an activist group for political speech and activism in opposition to U.S. foreign policy. In so doing, this prosecution strikes at the heart of the First Amendment. If successful, the Uhuru 3's appeal will establish precedent-setting case law to constrain the government's ability to criminalize speech merely by alleging a relationship between the accused and a foreign government, NGO, private entity, or individual. And on June 21st, during a webinar held by the Hands Off Uhuru Defense Campaign, Uhuru 3 defendant Jesse Neville spoke with one of the Uhuru 3 attorneys, Angela Rainey, about the significance of the appeal just filed. So we're going to play a clip from that webinar right now.
And Uhuru, everybody. And yeah, we did file this appeal on Monday. It's very exciting. And, the main issue that we raised is about the First Amendment. So all of the conduct that the government was mad about involved the political speech, which is protected under the First Amendment. And the way they got around that in the district court is they tried to say, well, we are saying you did it at the behest of Russia, so therefore it's not speech anymore. So that's the issue that we're raising. And, it's pretty clear that the First Amendment covers this speech, and we're arguing that, no, this is the same protected speech that they've engaged in for decades, and it doesn't lose its protection here. There's no case in the history of the United States that has held that political speech can turn into an act. So, and then so I think that was your first question, right, about the First Amendment issue. So,
yes.
Yeah.
And on that question, thank you, Angela. On the question of the First Amendment, one of the things that is so significant about this appeal is the potential that the appeal has to establish very far-reaching and highly consequential precedent in terms of case law in this country that has to do with constraining the ability of the US government to use these laws to criminalize speech. And, I think that's something that's becoming increasingly understood. It's the appeal. One of the objectives of the appeal, obviously, is to get the conviction of the chairman and the Uhuru 3 reversed on the bogus conspiracy charge. But there are even deeper and longer lasting goals than that have to do with the impact that this can have on the law itself and the First Amendment and these foreign agents laws. So if you could just talk a little bit about how this appeal seeks to actually impact the law through setting this precedent.
Yeah, so we have a huge opportunity to set really good precedent in this appeal. So in the federal system, the appeals courts are divided into different circuits. And down in Florida, we're in the 11th Circuit. So that's up in Atlanta, Georgia. If we get a favorable ruling in this case, it means all of the states in the 11th Circuit would have to follow that opinion. They couldn't prosecute any other activists like the Middle District of Florida did here for political speech. So that would be huge. But not only that area, there's not really another case that's addressed this. So the other circuits would look at this and likely follow it if we were to win this on appeal. And that would be huge because we don't want to see the government, start targeting other activist group for speech just because they're cooperating with another government. It's clearly a First Amendment right that we're able to associate and speak how we want to, and that's protected. So we want to make sure to set that precedent. So we'll cover everybody that way. All other groups, they won't have that fear. And part of it is what the effect that this had was it does chill your free speech, right? And that's something you'll hear in a lot of the case law. It's about the worry about chilling free speech. So I'm sure this has chilled free speech. I'm sure other organizations have thought twice about their associations and how they want to move forward. And that shouldn't happen. And we want to change that.
Uhuru. Thank you, Angela. I really appreciate what you're saying, and I think it speaks to the point that the chairman was making, right when this happened, that the attack on the Uhuru movement, as he said, was the canary in the coal mine that really set the stage. And, we need to remember, as people do, that this attack on the Uhuru movement was unleashed under the Biden administration, which really set the foundation for the ongoing intensification of attacks on anti-colonial free speech that have continued to escalate under the Trump administration. And we've seen students, Palestinians and other Arab students and African students being deported or being detained without having access to an attorney. We're seeing the attacks and threats against Union del Barrio and other organizations by the Senate, by Josh Hawley, and it's clearly, shows that this case continues to be the tip of the spear for the fight for anti-colonial free speech, and its implications are huge for anybody and everybody that cares about free speech.
Uhuru. Yes. So I know we're going now into our last headline with Comrade Mariah.
So next up in the headlines, we're looking at Juneteenth, a holiday that's becoming more visible in recent years with parades, recognition, and even a day off of work for some. And it marks June 19th, 1865, the day when the last enslaved African people in Galveston, Texas, were told they were free. We're told they were free 2.5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation. Now let's sit with that for a minute here. Juneteenth celebrates freedom that was delayed, withheld, and manipulated, and yet today it's marketed like this liberation was fully delivered, signed, sealed, and grilled right next to your hot dog. But as Chairman Amalia Shatella reminds us, Juneteenth, not yet Uhuru. And Uhuru means freedom in its truest sense. And while Juneteenth commemorates a moment in history, it does not mark the end of oppression for African people. Not in 1865, not in 1965, and not here in 2025 either. And because if we're being honest, African people are still being policed, displaced, and incarcerated in record numbers. Our land is still being stolen, our labor still exploited, and our children targeted by fallen schools and poisoned air. And we're still trapped in this system, a system that treats our pain like it's profitable. And so, yes, we celebrate the resistance of our ancestors, the beauty of our survival, and the culture that we have built in spite of it all. And we don't get confused throughout any of it. Juneteenth is not the finish line. It's a reminder that freedom delayed is still freedom denied. And our fight is far from over. And until we control our own land, we control our own resources, and we control our own destiny, it's not yet Uhuru. And just to bring it full circle here, while we're reflecting on the meaning of Juneteenth and how far we still have to go, Donald Trump recently made a social media posting saying there are, quote, too many non-working holidays already. And let's be clear, that's not just about days off. That's about erasing the recognition of Black struggle and dismissing the significance of Juneteenth itself. Because when he says there are too many holidays, he's not talking about Columbus Day. He's not talking about President's Day. He's talking about Juneteenth, a day that finally began to acknowledge the brutal legacy of slavery in this country and the long delay of freedom of African people. What he's really saying is, why should we stop the machine to recognize your pain? And why should the economy pause to honor the stolen lives and stolen labor that built this country, is what he should really ask. So it's the same mindset that we should move on from slavery, that says that we've already been given enough, and that ignores the very real systems that still choking the lives of African people, choking the lives and the futures of African people and Black people across the country. So when Trump says too many non-working holidays, what we really hear is too much truth, too much history, too much acknowledgement of what America really is. And that's exactly why Juneteenth matters, not just as a holiday, but as a demand. Because until there is justice, until there is a land, until there is power in the hands of the people, it's not yet Uhuru.
Not yet Uhuru.
And that's on period. Uhuru, Kara, Mariah. And that will conclude our Whirlwind Weekly Update, comrades. Thank you all so much for taking us through those headlines. And I'm sure Walmart would disagree also by the not making money on Juneteenth part, because they definitely be selling Juneteenth stuff. But anyway, we have to move on to this week's primary objective, which last week we reported on the mass resistance by colonized Mexican indigenous people against the colonial kidnappings and raids by ICE. The US government initiated attacks against the people for protesting the violent detaining of Mexican indigenous people from their own land, separating mothers, fathers, and children in the latest sweep to reinforce these colonial borders. The US deployed the National Guard to Los Angeles, California, further escalating the terror inflicted on African and indigenous communities and those exercising their First Amendment right to free speech. In an attempt to shut down anti-colonial free speech activity, now the state is threatening counter-terrorist investigations on organizations they are accusing of providing financial aid to quote-unquote unlawful activity, which includes our comrades that are being accused, our comrades of the Mexican Liberation Organization, Union del Barrio. And we must be clear that these accusations are baseless, they are bogus, and they are an attempt at threatening Union and its organizers into silence and inactivity. We also know that the US government will fabricate and change the law in order to justify its attacks on colonized people working to reverse the verdict of colonialism. And we must stand shoulder to shoulder with our comrades and see it to it that this latest assault on anti-colonial free speech is unsuccessful.
That's right. So today we are joined by Comrade Francisco Chavo Romero of Union del Barrio. And this comrade is going to be talking about talking to us about the growing resistance and how we, the people, can support their work. And I just want to say, Uhuru first, and I want to, salute, your incredible revolutionary leadership and the fraternal relationship that the Uhuru Movement has had with Union del Barrio for over 40 years. May Ernesto Bustillos rest in peace. And just wanted to ask if you could tell our viewers really quickly about Union del Barrio and its mission. Uhuru.
Greetings, comrades. I'm hoping that you could hear me. My apologies, I had a schedule here. I had an internet issue and the location I was at previously, so I transitioned here. So thank you so much for the invitation. My name is Chavo Romero, member of Union del Barrio, based out of Los Angeles, Tonga people, indigenous people territory, territorial of the indigenous people. Union del Barrio, we are a Mexican liberation organization that believes in the social dignification of our land. We also understand clearly that we are an indigenous people from what is now known as Alaska all the way down to the tip of what is now known as Chile. So this entire continent is a continent of indigenous people that have been colonized for 500 plus years. And so we as a Union del Barrio serve as a continued legacy and connection to that resistance of 500 years plus. We do so by employing and deploying organizational projects in the ladders that we're organizing out of. And we continue to build our party. That is our primary objective. Having learned the lessons from history, having learned many righteous, beautiful lessons from you all, the Uhuru Movement, the African People's Socialist Party, in particular, as you mentioned, sister, over 4 decades long journey together. And I am, we kind of think generationally, and so I kind of came in maybe in the 4th generation of the growth of this organization, and I had the opportunity to organize alongside Comrade Neto. It was actually, one of the ones that really inspired me to understand clearly what the conditions and the issues around that are really set, and the APSC has it down clearly that the common enemy is the look. So that is a little bit about our organization. We have a multi-pronged kind of platform that we invite y'all to check out at our website, uniondelbarrio.org.
Uhuru. And I also did remember seeing the video statement that you all released just today, I believe it was.
Uhuru, yeah. Did you want to say something to that, Comrade Francisco? Go ahead. Didn't mean to cut you
Yeah.
off.
No. I think the statement I believe you're speaking to is a statement we put out in English and Spanish over the weekend, but it's like went like uh, viral in the last 24 hours, so it's on more people's feeds. And it's a statement that is describing the current conditions and the fact that it's, I'll kind of walk through as you ask me the question today.
Yeah, thank you for that. And yeah, thank you first of all for joining us today and giving us that really good overview of, how you came to Union del Barrio, what Union del Barrio stands for, and just this long history that the APSP has had with Union del Barrio, understanding the common enemy that we're all fighting, right? And so in this common enemy, would you please tell us a bit about what the situation has been like on the ground with the protests against ICE's violent and really incessant raids on the Mexican indigenous people in California?
Yeah, thank you. With the support that we're sounding, we have lowriders and motorcycle folks cruising through here in the barrio I'm at, in Southeast Los Angeles. So, yeah, we have been under heavy attack, a full-on assault on Mexican and Latin here, indigenous people in these territories. Really, it's been an ongoing thing from the beginning, but starting with starting in February of this year, uh, you know, the current imperial president, President Trump, he promised that they were gonna launch the most massive raids and detention deportation ever in the history of the empire here. And so, hearing that on the campaign trail, what we as the Union Barrio did is that we knew that we had to turn and look for their allies in comrade organizations and say, you know what, we need to build some principal unity or a campaign of self-defense because this is coming and we need to be prepared. So we had the conversations like in late December. By January, we're kind of like meeting with key organizations. By February, like a couple of weeks before the date that they had set, which was late February, where they were going to launch the full-on assault of operations for detention deportation using all the military elements that they've created to hunt us down, known as CPB and ICE mainly, and all four of the branches, right? So to that end, um, we launched the Communities Coalition for Self-Defense, which united over 60 organizations initially. It was standing room only here in Los Angeles. We said, hey, y'all, we're going to need to unite on this self-defense. And please send two representatives from each of the organizations. We had full house, standing room only, because people were hearing the same thing we were doing, that the type of was coming. So since then, I'll go into a little more around like how we have grown as a coalition, in a bit. But I do want to speak to the nature of some of the things that we're employing in that initial stage of self-defense, and then where we're at now. So the first stage was something that we had already been doing, which was community self-defense control, which essentially is our organization and allies kind of getting into vehicles with radios, with our phones, with megaphones, with literature, and we were going early in the morning during the dawn hours, which is when these military operations, we call them military operations because that's exactly what they are, and the CBP and ICE, and I'll explain that in a little bit what we mean by that. Um, you know, these operations were taking place during the morning, where what we call the migra. So in general, I'm going to say the migra, which includes all those military forces that are deployed to detain and capture our people and kidnap us. They were doing surveillance and capturing our people right as they were getting ready to go to work. Kind of leaving out the door, down the street, or as families were taking kids to school. That's when they were going in for the move to capture our people and kidnap them. So what we were doing is patrolling certain sectors of the neighborhood, and just straight out, like for us, like one of our strongest states in Los Angeles, South Central, towards South Central, which really is a Black, African, and Mexican community. So we definitely are in unity with the Black community on this. And you've seen maybe you have seen some footage around how we're united around this. And so what we started to do was detect these operations before they went on the move to on the quote target, as they call it, which is us. We were able to detect them because we had full on training. Because we grew up here in the hood, and so we could see a cop and smell them a mile away, right? Like whether they're marked vehicles or undercover, we already know where they're at. Like, hey, what's this car? This car's not from this neighborhood. Hey, go check it out, see what's going on right there, right? So we kind of already had that kind of going up, really. So then we kind of just organized it in a way where we're like, all right, all of us go, and we see a vehicle. When we see one vehicle undercover with an agent inside of it, we know that there's at least 3 or 4 or even more all around. And so what we do is we go in, we rotate around them, and then one of our units goes on one side, one on the other, and we knock on the window. Hey, how you doing? Can we ask who you are? Before they were responding, and now they're not even responding. As a matter of fact, now they're not even doing that anymore, where they're staging outside of our neighborhoods. Now, because the communities have become so organized in protecting them and taking the element of surprise from under them by learning and forming the community, because that's what we do, right? When we detect them and we see it, and they refuse to identify themselves, we turn around with a megaphone that alerts the community. Say, hey, everybody, heads up. There's some sort of military operation happening here. If you're looking for somebody, everybody lock in, self-defense. If you're not as vulnerable as others, come out here and start, kind of filming them, kind of like just kind of forming like a line to kind of say, we're here watching, right? And we're very careful too, because we walk it up to the line because at one point they're looking for that element of quote obstruction or some sort of conspiracy to obstruct, and we're not falling for it. We're saying, hey, you're here in the neighborhood, you're not identifying yourself, we don't even know what you're doing here, right? So because of that, you're forcing our community to be more vigilant upon you. So if you don't like it, you're more than welcome to abort whatever operation you have going on. And that's what's been happening. So now, I'll pause there. That was kind of like the beginning stages. I can walk you up a little bit, but maybe I'll pause with with a little bit of prompt of a question, because there's just a lot going on. So I want to kind of pinpoint the things that you're like most interested in hearing today.
Uhuru, comrade friends, thank you for speaking to that and letting us know as far as being in the community. And thank you for bringing that up about how, working together with the Black and African community as far as when it comes to that brutal force that ICE is doing in the area. Now, speaking to that a little bit more, when it comes to those community patrols that you were talking about setting up and that force there, can you speak a little bit more to that impact and just really how the people can really assist in helping get the word out about those raids in the area and just the agents being in the area and just more of that sort? Can you speak to that?
Yeah. So because the CPB and ICE, which is their main operatives out there, military operatives that are immigration enforcement, CBP has 2 divisions. One is the border patrol, and the second one is the field operations. They're usually more towards like the actual line, the border here in the south. But there's a new regulation or a policy that was always kind of sitting there, but now they're employing it now, which is called the 100-mile rule from any coastline or entry point. So that's why they're able to come into Los Angeles. The border patrol, which we usually see out at the actual border down in near San Diego area or in Texas, in the Paso area, they're inland now because they're using the coastline as their entry point. As in, Los Angeles is way closer than the beach communities, and like here where I'm at in east side, we're like 15 miles, 20 from the from that line. So they could keep going in, which they are. They're going all the way into Riverside County, etc., and even all the way up the whole central valley, like which is called the 5 freeway that goes up and west of that. So they are deploying and moving all their military forces, immigration enforcement forces, that from other locations here. They're trying to crush the organized resistance that we've been holding here in defense of our communities, to prevent the separation of our families, to prevent the brutalization, the coercion, the actual capturing and the deportations. And so that frustration that they're having has now led to them to maneuver around us. This is the current moment that we're in. On top of that current moment we're in, because of the resistance, other military forces have been deployed here to Los Angeles to crush this resistance, including the National Guard. There's 4,100 now, and 700 Marines, right? Kind of organizing. Actually, what they're doing is actually protecting the operations of the other agents that are hunting us down. And that's what they're doing.
I want
Yeah,
to also give the people, we've got about 60 seconds. Can you tell our comrades and listeners how they can support Union del Barrio's work and the overall liberation struggle of the Mexican and indigenous people of North America and the Americas in general? Uhuru.
Uhuru, comrades. Yeah, thank you so much. Again, in the short time I have, I'll say, please follow us on our social medias account of Union del Barrio, at Union del Barrio, and we're in different platforms. Please follow us on our website. Log in for updates, and if you know anybody in the neighborhoods that needing support, connect them to us. And we're doing a lot of trainings, etc. Because the experiment that they're doing here on trying to crush this resistance, they're going to export it to other neighborhoods. So we're saying be ready because they're going to come your way. So that's how. So thank you again for giving us space and time here to give you an update on the front lines here. And what we're calling the battle of Los Angeles.
Uhuru, hasta la victoria siempre.
Hasta la victoria, saludos.
Uhuru, comrade Francisco, thank you again so much, and salute to Union del Barrio, and really just appreciate giving us this play-by-play, what's happening, and the work that Union del Barrio is actively doing. We don't just talk about the contradictions, right? We don't just talk about the issues, but we change the world, and comrades in Union del Barrio are changing the world and practicing self-determination. And, we're talking about seizing state power, and that's what those patrols are. And so really salute the comrades of Union del Barrio, and, long live the unity of African and indigenous liberation struggle. We will win. We are winning, comrades, and support the work of Union del Barrio, Uhuru. Wow, this is incredible, incredible period, incredible time. And you got to be on the right side of history, because as you can see, we are not playing about achieving freedom in our lifetime. That includes Africans, Mexican, indigenous people, Palestinian people, Iranians, and the colonized and oppressed throughout the world are standing up to the big bad bully known as the U.S., the chief hegemon of the colonial mode of production. So the day of old is out the window. We are changing the world, comrades. So as the U.S. government continues its war on anti-colonial free speech, you can help us fight back by getting our channel to 15,000 subscribers. This is the place to get your news and analysis, because it's the sorely missing worldview of African workers and colonized people. We are force-fed the perspective of the colonizer every single day, which is infused with their interests, their hopes, their aspirations, and their fears. And we sometimes mistakenly adopt those as our own because we're not regularly having or seeing discussions informed by our struggle for freedom. So this is why you should support this show by sharing, liking, and subscribing. So we had some great For the Culture prepared for you today, and Comrade Solyana really did the work to introduce us to an author, Ngũgĩ wa Thiong'o, in Kenya, who recently passed away. We are going, because the discussion really deserves just the depth, we're going to save that For the Culture for next week. So that's just a little stay tuned. You want to check out One Africa Worldview, episode 8 next Monday, so you can, tap into that conversation. So now, though, we are going to move on to the wrap up with Comrade Mariah. Let's see what we got going on this week.
Yoo-hoo. Well, on Wednesday, June 25th at 6:30 Central, join the African People's Solidarity Committee, the white solidarity organization under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party, for their event looking at the root causes of climate change and how you can be a part of the solution under the leadership of that African revolution. Colonialism is destroying the environment and why self-determination for African indigenous people is the climate solution. This event is being held in person at the Uhuru Solidarity Center in St. Louis at 2654 Gravois Avenue and online at the same time. You can reserve your spot over at apscuhuru.org/register. That's apscuhuru.org/register. And if you find yourself in St. Louis on Wednesday, July 9th, join the Solidarity with Northside Benefit for the Black Power Blueprint at Work and Leisure event space on 3015 Locust St. John. Join us for an evening of music, poetry, dance, food, and raffle prizes. All proceeds will go towards the Black Power Blueprint, Black community programs of self-determination and economic development in North St. Louis, rebuilding in the aftermath of the tornado devastation. You can register and purchase your raffle tickets at blackpowerblueprint.org/benefit. And on Saturday, July 26, 2025 at 1 p.m. Eastern, the Hands Off Uhuru Fight Back Coalition presents When We Fight, We Win, 3 years after the FBI raids on the Uhuru Movement. Join us on the 3rd anniversary of the brutal FBI police raids on 7 homes and offices of the Uhuru Movement in 2 cities as we hear messages of support and solidarity from numerous organizations and individuals who have stood with Chairman Omali Yeshitela and the Uhuru Movement. Join the fight back to fund the legal defense to appeal the bogus conspiracy conviction. You can register at handsoffyahoo.org/Uhuru3. That's handsoffyahoo.org/Uhuru3. And that's it for what's coming this week. And don't forget, you can check out theburningspear.com/events calendar to see everything that's upcoming.
Uhuru. All right. Well, thank you for joining in, comrades, and thank you for tuning in to our wonderful listeners. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Join us again on One Africa Worldview next week at 5 p.m. Eastern on the Burning Spear TV YouTube, as well as the Burning Spear Media Rumble channels. And with that, comrades, One Africa,
One nation.